The most devastating weapon against a narcissist isn't rage. It's not revenge. It's when the empath, after years of absorbing pain, finally says enough. This video isn't about drama or blame. It's about a hidden psychological war, one that Carl Jung understood more deeply than most. A battle that doesn't happen with fists or shouting, but with silence, awareness, and truth. On one side, you have the narcissist, charming, calculating, addicted to control. On the other, the empath, deeply feeling, endlessly forgiving, always searching for something real beneath the mask. Jung saw this not as coincidence, but as chemistry. He wrote, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But what happens when the reaction is toxic? What happens when the empath, driven by love and belief, finds themselves caught in a loop of manipulation, caretaking, and emotional exhaustion?" According to Jung, the narcissist's greatest fear isn't being argued with. It's being seen. Seen by someone who finally wakes up to the truth. Someone who no longer plays the role they were cast in. And here's where it gets powerful. When the empath stops trying to fix the narcissist and starts reclaiming themselves, everything changes. So if you've ever felt stuck in a relationship that drains you emotionally, mentally, even spiritually, what you're about to hear might shift how you see power, connection, and freedom itself. Stay with me, because understanding this dynamic could be the moment you finally wake up too. Let's talk about the empath not as a trendy label, but as a deeply rooted psychological archetype. Empaths are more than just sensitive people. According to Carl Jung and many modern psychologists, empaths possess an extraordinary emotional radar. They don't just hear your words, they feel the energy beneath them. They sense what you're not saying. They pick up on the shift in your tone, the flicker in your eyes, the heaviness in a room after someone has been hurt. It's a beautiful gift. But it comes with a hidden cost. Because in a world that often rewards performance over presence, empaths become the emotional caretakers. The ones who stay late to make sure everyone's okay. The ones who say, "I'm fine," even when they're not, because someone else's pain feels more urgent than their own. Here's where it gets dangerous. That deep, emotional openness. It makes empaths incredibly attractive to narcissists. Why? Because a narcissist isn't looking for someone to love. They're looking for someone to mirror them, feed them, regulate them. And empaths, compassionate, loyal, deeply attuned, become perfect targets. It's not that empaths are weak. In fact, it's the opposite. They are strong enough to carry emotions that don't even belong to them. But that's exactly why narcissists seek them out. Because the empath will explain away bad behavior. They'll overextend. They'll believe there's still something underneath that mask worth saving. Jung once said, "The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed." But what happens when one of those substances is toxic? The empath walks into the dynamic thinking they've found connection. The narcissist walks in knowing they've found supply. And the pain of that realization that you weren't seen but used is something many empaths only come to understand years later. So if you've ever asked yourself, why do I attract people who drain me? Why is it so hard to walk away from someone who hurts me? You're not broken. You're not foolish. You're feeling what most people are trained to ignore. The truth is, your sensitivity isn't the problem. But without boundaries, it becomes a magnet for people who feed off your empathy, but never return it. Understanding this is the first step. Because once you realize your gift has been exploited, you also realize you can take it back. And in the next part, we'll dive deeper into the trap that keeps empaths stuck in these toxic cycles and why the thing that binds them isn't weakness, but belief. On the surface, it looks like a perfect match. The narcissist craves love, attention, admiration. The empath lives to give, to understand, to heal. From the outside, this dynamic can even look romantic. One person needs to be seen. The other is willing to see them fully. One wants to be understood, the other listens deeply. It seems balanced. But Carl Jung warned us not all chemistry leads to connection. Sometimes it creates combustion, because beneath this perfect match lies something far more dangerous, a psychological performance. One where the narcissist writes the script and the empath unknowingly plays the lead role, without ever realizing they're in a show. Here's how it works. The narcissist doesn't connect in the way most people do. They construct a persona, a carefully crafted version of themselves designed not to relate, but to extract. Extract admiration, extract loyalty, extract emotional labor, all while giving back just enough to keep the empath hopeful. Meanwhile, the empath, driven by a deep belief in human goodness, keeps investing. They think, if I just love harder, if I stay a little longer, if I'm patient enough, I'll reach the real person behind the mask. But here's the heartbreaking truth for many narcissists. The mask is the person. There is no hidden version waiting to be healed. There's only performance and control. Jung understood this dynamic well. He saw that what keeps the empath trapped isn't weakness, it's hope. A hope that their love can transform the narcissist. A hope that what feels imbalanced today will somehow become healthy tomorrow. And that hope, it becomes the chain. So the empath overfunctions. They explain away red flags. They confuse trauma bonding for intimacy. They rationalize manipulation as misunderstanding. Because to accept the truth that the connection was never mutual is soul-crushing. It means accepting that what felt like love may have been something else entirely. If you're hearing this and it hits a nerve, ask yourself, have you ever stayed in a relationship because of potential, because you believed your love could change someone? You're not alone. Millions of emotionally intelligent, compassionate people fall into this same loop. Not because they're naive, but because they believe. And that belief, when unexamined, becomes the bait in the narcissist's trap. The good news: recognition is the beginning of freedom. When you start to see the pattern, you stop feeding it. And in the next part, we'll explore why that belief is so powerful and how Carl Jung uncovered the inner shift that begins the empath's journey toward true liberation. Let's clear something up right now. When an empath stays too long in a toxic relationship, it's not because they're naive. It's because they believe. And that belief, Carl Jung observed, can be both beautiful and dangerous. Empaths don't stay because they're weak. They stay because they have a deep-rooted hope that people can change. That pain can be healed. That if they just show enough love, enough patience, enough understanding, they'll finally break through to something real beneath the narcissist's mask. That's not foolish. That's faith. But here's the trap. Jung noted that what keeps empaths locked in these relationships isn't just emotional attachment. It's the belief in redemption. The belief that the narcissist isn't really this cold, dismissive, or manipulative person. That somewhere behind all the gaslighting, the guilt trips, the charm then withdraw pattern, is someone who's just misunderstood, wounded, waiting to be rescued. And let's be honest, that belief often comes from a good place. Many empaths grew up learning that love means staying, that healing means absorbing, that compassion means self-sacrifice. But Jung warned that unless we examine this belief system, we'll keep repeating the same pattern thinking we're helping when we're actually being harmed. Because here's the reality. You can't save someone who's using your hope as a weapon. You can't heal someone who doesn't want to be whole. And every time you excuse their behavior because they're just hurting you, silently send a message to yourself. My pain doesn't matter as much as theirs. That internal message is the real prison. That's the trap. So if you're someone who's found yourself saying, "They're not always like this. I just need to be more patient. They'll change if I love them enough." Take a breath. Ask yourself, is this belief helping you or holding you hostage? Jung taught that until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you'll call it fate. The empath's journey begins the moment they realize this isn't fate. It's a pattern, and patterns can be broken. Here's the truth no one tells you. Letting go of that belief doesn't make you cruel. It makes you clear. And once that clarity sets in, something shifts. You stop trying to rescue someone who doesn't want to be rescued, and you start rescuing yourself. In the next part, we'll explore what that awakening really looks like and why the empath's silence becomes the narcissist's greatest fear. Let's get to one of the most painful truths an empath has to face in this dynamic. The narcissist you're trying to reach, the one you believe is hiding underneath the mask, may not actually exist. Carl Jung observed something chilling yet eye-opening. He realized that for many narcissists, the mask isn't just a role, they've become the mask. That charming, wounded, complex persona that pulls you in is not concealing the real person. It is the person. And this is where things get psychologically devastating for the empath. Because you're not just loving someone who's emotionally unavailable. You're loving someone who is fully invested in a false self and who needs that mask more than they'll ever need genuine connection. The empath keeps hoping, if I can just love them deeper, if I'm patient long enough, if I show them what real intimacy feels like, they'll drop the act. But the act isn't temporary. It's survival. You see, narcissists build their identity around what Jung called the persona, a carefully curated image meant to be admired, never questioned. It's a performance built on power control and emotional extraction, not relationship, not growth, not mutual vulnerability. And here's the most tragic part, the empath is often the only one in the relationship hoping for something real, while the narcissist is simply managing appearances. So what happens? The empath stays longer than they should. They confuse emotional intensity for emotional depth. They mistake apology for accountability. And they wait sometimes for years for the real person to emerge. But Jung's insight hits hard. There is no deeper self waiting behind the manipulation. What you see is what you get. And when you finally accept that, it's heartbreaking. Because you realize you weren't loving a person. You were loving a performance. That realization is enough to shatter someone emotionally, but it can also set them free. Because once you stop trying to unmask the narcissist, you stop bargaining with illusion. You begin to ask a different question. Why was I so willing to believe there was more? And that's where the healing begins, not by changing them, but by seeing clearly. If you've ever felt like you were loving someone who never really showed up, no matter how long you waited, this might be why. In the next part, we'll explore what truly keeps empaths stuck in this cycle, and how breaking free begins with questioning the one thing they've held on to the most belief. There comes a moment, quiet, almost unnoticeable, when something inside the empath shifts. It's not rage. It's not rebellion. It's clarity. Carl Jung called this the beginning of transformation, and for the empath, it often starts with something that looks like detachment. But make no mistake, this is not coldness or indifference. This is a deep psychological awakening. For years, the empath may have been caught in the emotional gravity of the narcissist's world, reacting, fixing, absorbing every mood and manipulation. They've danced on eggshells, played peacekeeper, tried to be enough. But when the first phase of transformation begins, the empath stops playing the game not out of anger, but out of understanding. They begin to see the patterns, the praise followed by punishment, the chaos masked as intimacy, the apologies that always come with conditions. And here's what changes: they stop participating. It's subtle at first. Maybe they stop explaining themselves. Maybe they don't take the bait during an argument. Maybe they go quiet, not to retreat, but to reclaim space. Jung believed that true growth often begins with withdrawing your energy from anything that no longer honors your integrity. And that's exactly what happens here. The empath starts detaching emotionally, not to hurt the narcissist, but to heal themselves. This detachment isn't about closing off. It's about stepping outside a toxic narrative that never served them. And what does this look like in real life? It looks like the person who no longer flinches at silent treatment. It looks like walking away from an argument instead of defending every word. It looks like realizing, I don't need to earn basic respect. In this first phase, the empath begins to question what part of me believed I had to stay. And that question cracks open a whole new level of truth. Because emotional detachment doesn't just free you from them, it frees you from the false identity you had to wear to survive them. Jung wrote, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." This moment, this first emotional break, is when the unconscious becomes visible. And suddenly you're not confused anymore. You're awake. In the next part, we'll explore the second phase of this transformation, where silence becomes power, and the empath learns the incredible strength of non-reaction. Because when you stop dancing to someone else's music, you finally hear your own. There's a moment in every healing journey that no one talks about enough. It's not just the day you leave. It's the day you rise. This final phase in the empath's transformation isn't about escaping the narcissist. It's about becoming someone they never expected you to become. Stronger, wiser, whole. Carl Jung observed that real growth doesn't come from avoiding pain. It comes from integrating it. And when an empath reaches this stage, something extraordinary happens. They begin to thrive, not in spite of what they endured, but because of it. Let that sink in. You don't just heal, you evolve. And this is what terrifies the narcissist most. Why? Because in their world, they believe they are the center, the light, the source, the reason. But when the empath begins to shine without them, it shatters that illusion. The narcissist can no longer say they need me. Because now you don't. Your energy is no longer feeding their ego. Your identity is no longer shaped by their manipulation. You've reclaimed yourself. This thriving phase is not about revenge, it's about rebirth. It's about building a life on your terms, grounded in your truth, no longer seeking approval or rescuing those who refuse to grow. It might look like starting a new career, finally speaking your truth, setting firm boundaries, or simply feeling peace in your own presence. It's not always loud, but it's always powerful. Jung called this process individuation, the return to your authentic self. And when you reach it, something inside you stabilizes. You stop swinging between hope and heartbreak. You're no longer waiting for closure. You become your own closure. And the narcissist, they're left behind, not because you punished them, but because you outgrew them. And maybe that's the ultimate liberation. So if you're in the middle of that journey right now, hear this: you were never weak for caring, but you are now powerful for choosing yourself. Keep going. Have you ever noticed how a narcissist always needs an audience? It's not just about control, it's about being the center of your story. In their mind, they are the sun, and everyone else should orbit around them. But here's the twist they never see coming. When the empath begins to heal and rise, the narcissist doesn't just lose control, they lose relevance. Carl Jung understood something deeply unsettling for narcissists. The moment you stop seeing them as the source of your light, their entire illusion falls apart. Because a narcissist survives on significance. They crave to be needed, feared, admired. So when the empath no longer needs fixing, or worse, no longer even needs them at all, that's when the real collapse happens. And it's not dramatic. It's quiet. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop playing the role they cast you in. Suddenly, they're no longer the main character. They're just someone you used to know. And to a narcissist, that's unbearable. Because what they fear most isn't being hated, it's being irrelevant. To no longer have a place in your emotional world is to lose the one thing they fight to protect: their identity as the center of someone else's universe. That's why your healing is not just personal, it's revolutionary. When you rise, when you rebuild, when you reclaim your peace, you're not just freeing yourself. You're dismantling the lie that their power ever came from within them. It always came from your attention, your energy, your belief. So ask yourself, what happens when you stop giving that away? That's when the narcissist's relevance collapses. Not because you attacked them, but because you evolved. And that right there is how you win. There comes a moment in every empath's journey where silence turns into wisdom. And boundaries are no longer about defense, they're about self-respect. Carl Jung called this sacred moment individuation, the process of becoming fully, unapologetically yourself. And for the empath who has survived narcissistic manipulation, this isn't just a phase of healing, it's the beginning of true liberation. You see, the empath's power was never lost. It was scattered, given away in tiny pieces through constant giving, fixing, and forgiving. But when the empath finally draws the line, not out of bitterness, but out of clarity, that's the day their real life begins. And here's the key: this boundary isn't a wall built from anger. It's a framework constructed from truth. This kind of boundary doesn't scream, "Stay out." It calmly whispers, "I know who I am now." That's the power of individuation. It's when you stop bending to be accepted. It's when you stop editing yourself to keep the peace. It's when you realize that being whole is more important than being liked. Most people confuse boundaries with punishment. But real boundaries are an invitation to rise with you or fall away. They say, "This is the version of me I've worked hard to become, and I will not abandon her again." Think about this. When was the last time you said no, not from fear or guilt, but from love for yourself? That's not selfish. That's sacred. Jung understood that individuation is the soul's declaration of independence. It's the quiet roar that says, "I don't need to prove anything anymore." And that's what makes it so powerful and so terrifying to narcissists. Because once you've individuated, the narcissist can't access you anymore. They can't guilt you, gaslight you, or shape your identity, because you've reclaimed it. And perhaps the most beautiful part, you no longer need closure from the one who broke you. You are the closure. You are the boundary. You are the freedom. So if you're in this phase right now, setting boundaries, finding your voice, walking away from roles that no longer fit, know this: you are not being too much. You are becoming whole. And wholeness is magnetic. It draws the right people in and filters the rest out. This is individuation, and it's not the end of your story. It's where the real one begins. Here's a truth many people never hear. Winning doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes, the most powerful victory is simply becoming whole again. Carl Jung believed that the ultimate triumph over manipulation isn't about destroying the narcissist. It's about rebuilding the self. Not in pieces, not in survival mode, but in full integrated wholeness. You see, narcissists thrive in chaos. They feed off emotional imbalance. They want to be the center of your pain, your confusion, your story. But the moment you stop playing the game, their power begins to dissolve. And when you rise not out of rage but out of clarity, they lose something they can never reclaim control over your identity. That's what terrifies them the most, because your healing becomes a mirror to their limitation. Your peace, your silence, your joy. It exposes the illusion they tried to sell you. And here's the irony: the narcissist never believed you could walk away, stand tall, and find your light again. But you did. Not only did you walk away, you didn't look back. You stopped needing them to validate your worth. You stopped seeking closure from someone who never gave you honesty. You stopped defining your story by their behavior. And in doing so, you proved something bigger: that manipulation has limits. That no matter how many times they twisted the truth, drained your energy, or blurred your reality, your soul remembered who it was before the war. And that memory is your power. True victory doesn't scream. It doesn't seek to humiliate. It simply outgrows. It transcends. It says, "You don't get to write my ending. I do." Let that sink in. If you've ever felt like healing quietly makes you invisible, remember this: your wholeness is the loudest thing they'll ever hear, because it echoes, it ripples, it inspires others still stuck in toxic loops to believe that freedom is possible. That's what Carl Jung meant when he spoke about the individuated self, a self no longer ruled by unconscious patterns or external chaos, but rooted in conscious wholeness. So no, you didn't win by hurting them back. You won by choosing peace over punishment, presence over performance, freedom over fear. You rebuilt yourself not as a reaction to who they were, but as a declaration of who you are. And that is the kind of victory no narcissist can ever touch. You know, narcissists don't actually fear your anger. They expect it. They even feed off it. What they truly fear is your awakening, your silence, your freedom. Because the moment you stop reacting, stop explaining, stop trying to fix what was never yours to carry, that's when the game ends. For good. Carl Jung once said, "Your boundaries are not just limits. They are the architecture of your freedom." Let that sink in. When you say no, not out of rage, but from self-respect, when you walk away, not in bitterness, but in clarity, you shift the entire dynamic. You become untouchable. And this is the final stage of the empath's journey. You stop being a battlefield. You become a sanctuary. You no longer crave chaos disguised as love. You no longer lose yourself trying to rescue someone who never intended to be saved. You remember who you were before the manipulation, and you choose to live from that truth. So ask yourself, what part of you still believes that healing has to look loud? What if the most revolutionary thing you could do is quietly take your power back, not to prove anything, but to reclaim your peace? If this video stirred something in you that's not an accident, it's a sign that you're no longer asleep, a sign that your healing is already in motion. And if you know someone still stuck in the cycle, someone who needs this message, share this video with them. Let them know they're not alone. And freedom is possible. And if you haven't already, subscribed for more content like this. Because sometimes one video is all it takes to start waking up.